don't want any consequences for my words.
Yeah, why? Who would sign up for consequences?
To be fair, I feel like I shouldn't have to. Never mind. All right, let's get into it. Speaking of, the Royal Tenenbaums. You know, if you just say "speaking of" after anything, it works. It's called a segue.
Everett Duran, lower third, segue king. Love it.
Called a segue. Speaking of, Keith, the Royal Tenenbaums.
Do you know how to spell segue? I just looked it up the other day, actually, because I was spelling it like the tool.
I don't know how to spell the tool. I know how to spell the word S-E-G-U-E.
That's pure insanity to spell segue that way. It's pure insanity to spell it that way. Seg, S-E-G-W-A-Y.
So you were spelling it segue this whole time?
Yeah, I'm 37, so for a good 36 and 3/4 of a year, I was I would spell segue how it sounds, not with like a Q in it.
To be fair, you screw up so many simpler words than segue, I can't even give you a hard time.
Thank you.
About segue.
Thank you. Speaking of segues.
Speaking of, the Royal Tenenbaums. It's a great movie. That's the intro. Keith thinks we need more intros in these. I disagree.
We need more context. We do not explain.
They know what they're watching
right
by now. It's we talk about movies. They know it's movies.
No, but the movie itself. Some people may not have seen the Royal Tenenbaums.
Well, you should be ashamed of yourselves.
Give some level of context so they could understand the witty banter that we have.
All right, Keith. The Royal Tenenbaums came out in 2001. It was directed by Wes Anderson. It was written by Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson. It stars an ensemble cast including Gene Hackman, Angelica Houston, Owen Wilson, Luke Wilson, Bill Murray, Gwyneth Paltrow, Danny Glover, Ben Stiller.
Do you know what audiences love? To be patronized. So this is a good start.
Look. Keith, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't, all right? Anyways,
well,
everybody.
After that magical, beautifully well-spoken synopsis of the film, this is one of your favorite films. What are we on? 6? 5?
Number
7?
6.
6. Number 6 favorite film of all time. Why is this one of your favorite films?
This film is really remarkable to me in a lot of ways. And the most remarkable thing about it is the thing that's really hard to verbalize, I think. And it's something I've tried to come up with a way of describing it. It's just the vibe and the energy and the whole thing wrapped together. And I use this phrase, I think, when we talked about Up in the Air. But I originated this phrase for this movie, and that is, it's like a hug. It's like the film is hugging you the whole time, and that is something accomplished by Wes Anderson and the filmmakers, the set designers, the production designers, that I don't know how to recreate, but I want to bottle that as a filmmaker myself and use that in every film.
I hear you're dying.
So they tell me.
I'm sorry.
Well, I've had a good run.
It really wafts over all my senses, and I'm just so invested and happy and reassured while watching it. And those are all things that I can't say that about any other movie, maybe like to this degree in history. For whatever that quality is, this film is the benchmark for it.
Do you think? I feel like I obviously don't have the same connection that you have with the film. I liked it, but do you think all Wes Anderson films are like that? Because I do. I don't get the same, again, that same sense that you're describing. I feel like Wes Anderson films are all very much the same. You're speaking to, I think, a stylistic sense that comes with these films. He does a really good job of creating a universe. And everything is very, like the character work, I think is one of the top things in this film. Like they feel very fleshed out, very developed. It feels very rich character-wise, and they live in this very tangible world that he has created. But I feel like that is his strength as a storyteller, is creating these universes and these worlds that you can easily sort of jump into, and it feels very authentic. That doesn't feel exclusive to this film specifically. That's more of a a trait that I think he possesses as a director.
When I rewatched it this most recent time, I really tried to pay attention to what the choices that he's making are that kind of create that vibe and that energy. And I think a huge part of it in this film in particular, though he does do it in a couple of others, is if you were to watch the film and no one told you what time period it was set in, almost any answer feels correct.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask that. I was actually going to ask that. Where and when is this film? Where and when does it take place?
Well, it takes place in the present day, which when the film was made was 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
And so the kids are, in the 70s when they're kids.
It does not feel like 2001.
I know, but that's sort of that's what makes it so interesting and feel, I think, so lived in. And I think it works two ways. One, by using, because the main thing to me that makes you feel like it's older, that it's an older time, is their outfits, the way they all dress is very like 70s, and the technology that they each use throughout is usually pretty dated. Mm-hmm. Gwyneth Paltrow is watching that like weird cube old TV and just things like that. Like it's very retro.
They use phone booths, don't they? Use phone? Isn't there phone? I remember there being like phone booths. People making phone booth phone calls. Like in 2001, did anyone get inside a phone booth to not urinate? What?
I love phone booths. We were still using phone booths in 2001.
We were?
1-800-COLLECT.
Dial 1-800-COLLECT.
Right. I was a junior in high school. We were calling mom for rides. Be like, when you call 1-800-COLLECT and be like, say your name after the tone. Mom, I'm outside of the high school. Come pick me up.
That's true. That's actually true. I guess I did do that. I definitely did do that, and I guess it was around that time.
Wow, 10 cents a minute? Give me that phone, brother.
That decision to sort of use old tech and old style works to, one, sort of make the world feel more lived in. The other thing it does is I think it sort of speaks to that the characters are kind of trapped in the past, and that all of them are still sort of consciously or subconsciously trying to be reliving their heydays, especially the children who all dress very similarly to what they did as children. And Royal Tenenbaum still has sort of that old swaggy style, and so I think that those are all very intentional decisions.
Maybe I wasn't as true to her as I could have been.
Well, she says...
Let's just drop that jelly chassis.
One of the things, speaking of, segue. SEGWAY. I think
the correct spelling.
One of the things I love most about this film, it'll probably go without saying, is the comedy, particularly of Gene Hackman. I think that Gene Hackman I think Royal Tenenbaum is one of my favorite 10 characters of all time in cinema. I just think he is so funny, so kind of deviously likable, like regrettably likable, because he is a scumbag. He's this cagey old dude, but he just his performance is really top shelf, and I think that carries the film. His little witticisms and little things he kind of slips in are they're just beautiful.
Lord knows I've had my share of infidelities, but she's still my wife.
I do agree. I think his performance is great. So I won't reiterate what you said, because I do think he is excellent in the film. The one thing I'll say on the other side is I feel like the film doesn't do enough to make me want to root for him. All his motives are, he's very true to character, and I do give, Wes Anderson credit. Again, as I said earlier, I think he's very in tune with his characters. No one speaks out of turn. But I don't think there's really anything that makes me, he's kind of shifty. He's kind of a scumbag. He's trying to get back into good graces for selfish reasons. When he's forced to confront that to Angelica Houston when she's like, why did you even come back here? And then he starts with saying, I didn't want you to marry this guy. And I was broke and I didn't have a place to stay. And you're like, well, that's why you did all this. You didn't do it for the love of your family. There was no like underlying, emotional thing where it's like, well, deep underneath, he's really a good guy. He just doesn't know how to go about it the right way. And that's kind of the balance I was hoping to sort of see from the character, is like, he is horribly flawed for whatever reasons. But he deep down wants to do the right thing. He just can't get there. Or just can't find the right way to do it. So he continues to dig himself deeper every time he tries to get better. But that's not really the case. He's just kind of a scumbag the whole time. And
But
maybe
yeah, I mean, he
by the end, maybe there's a little turn, but I don't even think there's a huge amount of growth to him. I guess there is when he says, I'll give you the divorce. But that kind of comes out of nowhere for me. Like, where did that come from again? I don't even remember.
Well, I think there is an arc over time. I think that's kind of one of the things that makes it interesting, is that I like that that your main protagonist's goals are kind of shitty up front, and that you don't, that there's not this thing there's not this sort of spoon-fed thing for you to kind of latch onto. So, I need something to latch onto to know that I'm rooting for this guy. You just kind of root for him on the strength of his charm. And because of the framework of the film establishes him as sort of the protagonist. But then over the arc of the story, he does, it's not like he completely transforms, but it's sort of in that realistic way of, okay, he learns enough about himself and the nature of family that he does seem to eventually have a genuine interaction with and understanding of the different members of his family, and is able to do things a little more selflessly.
You still consider me your father?
Sure I do.
I wish I had more to offer in that department.
I know you do, Pop.
So you're right, it's not a huge turn, but it is a turn nonetheless, and it's enough to establish a relationship with his kids before he dies.
Yeah.
I think the choice to have Ben Stiller's character be the only one that's in the ambulance with him and holding his hand as he dies, that's really, that always sneaks up on me emotionally. That's just a really powerful way. It wraps it up very impactfully.
For me, I did overall enjoy the movie. I'll just say that I did really enjoy it. So I just feel like these are more nitpicky things for conversation's sake. But the part that I really sort of sneaks up on me is I think the moment pretty soon just before that moment where he dies is he's got that long like dolly shot that sort of pans the fire truck, and you kind of get bits and pieces of the story. And I'm a big fan of shots like that. Like Rear Window, I felt like had a lot of that in it, obviously. So you get a little bits and pieces of story, and there's just moments that are living in that space. And the last thing is Gene Hackman brings over the dog to his son, Ben Stiller's character, that was reminiscent of the mice that he invented or whatever, that are running around the house the whole film. And Ben Stiller says one line, and it really resonates with me.
I've had a rough year, Dad.
I know you have, Chazzy.
That one line says to me, like I even get emotional just thinking about, like he finally lets his guard down. He's vulnerable in that moment. He calls him Dad. Like all things he would have never done before with this, the whole movie, he's fighting him and arguing and not believing in him and all that shit. But when he says it's been a tough year, Dad, he just feels exhausted at that moment and just needing his father to just be there for him and allowing him to be there for him. It's that moment for me, even just thinking about it now, makes me emotional. Not that I need my father to be there for Dads are stupid. But yeah, I really do love that part of just that one line says so much.
Yeah. I think there's a real mastery in this film of that balance between comedy and real emotional wallop.
Yeah.
I think that it does both almost simultaneously pretty flawlessly.
To any good comedy, and here's a quick little lesson for people out there trying to make comedy films, you're welcome. To any good comedy, to any good film, but really I think comedy works really well. You need real emotional stakes, because that the juxtaposition of the humor comes off of that. If you just have people slipping on banana peels with no real repercussions or no real like any meat to that, it falls flat to me. I think that the key to a good comedy is having real solid emotional stakes, and the absurdity can build off of that. Wes Anderson films, and this film specifically, have real weight to what's happening within this family. There's real family issues that are explored, and comedy comes off of that. And the film does it very, very well.
Perhaps the last thing I'll say about the direction, I think he unfairly gets pigeonholed into what people equate to his style, which is fair to an extent because he does have such a distinguishable style, and it's often so, I don't know, this isn't the right way to say it, but flat, like parallel. You know, everything is so...
Well, symmetrical. I mean, that's what I was going to say.
Symmetrical.
Go ahead. Symmetrical.
And there's not a lot of, typically, there's not a lot of, movement within the camera. I mean, sometimes you'll get pans, but even they're locked off on tripods, or, they're very rigid. But I noticed when looking for it in this film, a ton more movement of the camera than I ever remembered. And I thought, yeah, you know what? Like, the majority of the film, sure, it's in that Wes Anderson style, but there's a ton of camera movements that moves forward into a room, or a couple shots where it literally, like, that aren't Wes Anderson shots. And it was enough that I thought, maybe, there's a lot more movement than I gave him credit for.
Everything, I mean, it's the sign of a good director, but being just so purposeful with everything within his frame. There's no accidents, and there's no lazy coverage to anything that he does, and I think it's what makes him a very, very talented director. Even which, because he's so sort of static, it makes the movement that much more powerful for me. It becomes noticeable in a good way when I watch it, because it draws my attention in a way like it's signaling something to me as a viewer, that this is important, or I need to be at this point to really see this vantage point. I love the from a director standpoint, the scene where Owen Wilson and Gwyneth Paltrow like break up, and it goes, shot, and then there's like pan over, and then pan back.
Yeah, and that was one of the scenes I really noticed.
And then the camera move, then rather than a pan, the camera moves to one side, then the camera moves to another side, and then I think Gwyneth Paltrow walks into the frame, like and then it zooms. Then it zooms off of that to the report, the private eye or whatever. Yeah. Like, that scene had a lot of movement, a lot of motion, but very, very purposeful, very, very like planned, obviously. Yeah. And it speaks very loudly to me when watching it. So I remember that scene specifically. Like, wow, I really enjoyed it purely based on the directing.
Oh, that's right. We've got another body buried here, haven't we? Hold on. Take some of these.
I only really have one real con of this film, which keeps it from being like a perfect film almost, in my opinion. And it makes me sad. It makes me sad to acknowledge this flaw.
Good.
Because it's at the fault of someone who I enjoy. Ben Stiller, I think, is not very good.
He's not a great actor, though.
I mean, he's not great, but he's usually... I like Ben Stiller. I enjoy his comedies. I enjoy all of his cameos that he pops up in. Mm-hmm. I just like Ben Stiller.
Yeah.
I think that in the more dramatic roles that he's done, he does a good job. I haven't liked many of those movies, but I like him. I think he gives earnest performances that are totally, at worst, very passable. Like totally fine. And I think he could have been better in this role. So I don't even think he's miscast necessarily, but his performance is so it just doesn't feel as natural as everyone else's does. And his character is so like, kind of pouty and just like his little fits that he's constantly in are just, they're almost a little too much, I think. There's not a lot of... He doesn't feel as real of a character as, say, Margot Tenenbaum or Richie Tenenbaum, Gwyneth Paltrow and Luke Wilson, who really give these morose, really believable performances where Ben Stiller's a little, just a little more goofy. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say, but it's enough that every time I watch it, I'm like I think he does good at the end. Like you mentioned the line.
I love
where he
that
says,
line.
It's been a
yeah.
tough year, Dad, or whatever like that. Yeah, he's doing well in that, and there's moments where he's okay, but when he's just like meh, meh. Like he's just doing this thing that I just don't. It just takes me away from it a little bit.
Hey! Are you listening to me? Yes, I am!
Do you want to know what my rule for Ben Stiller is?
Sure.
I only watch movies that he wears a mustache. That's it. There's other than if he's not wearing a mustache, he's not going to give a good performance. I think what you're just describing is his sort of limitations as an actor. Some actors who are known for comedic roles are limited within their acting ability, and they get pigeonholed as to, like Will Ferrell, for example, is super funny, but he's one note. He's not going to give you a range. Not to say that he's not a good comedic actor. He's just not a good actor.
I think if we want to say that Ben Stiller's not a great actor, and we want to say that Will Ferrell's not a great actor in terms of like range and ability to play more dramatic roles, I almost think that those guys are exceptions to the rule. Because I think as a whole, very talented comedic actors are more likely to be able to play a range, and it's that old adage or idiom or what have you, adage that it's easier to play straight than it is to be a comedic actor. Like it takes more talent to be funny. Anyone can play a dramatic role.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. There is real talent in comedic acting that I want to hold here and say, Ben Stiller is good at this, but this does not equal that he's good at all of this.
Other performances that stand out to me, I think almost everyone except for Ben Stiller. Danny Glover is fine. I don't think Danny Glover is phenomenal in this. I think Luke Wilson, as I watched this last time, I thought this is Luke Wilson's best role. This is his most interesting role that he does his best acting in, and I went down like the Luke Wilson rabbit hole for a minute, and I'm so fascinated and saddened on behalf of these actors and actresses who have such a bright, shining moment for a few years and then just like disappear. And I've even since I was a kid, I've been so interested in why that happens. And what, because like Luke Wilson's still working. Luke Wilson is still making movies. Mm-hmm. It's just you haven't heard of any of them, and some of them look like
really good,
insanely awful.
I'll have one of those.
It's on me.
It's all inclusive.
Okay, well, second one's on me too.
Where do you go? Like you were in this, you were in Old School, you were the romantic lead in Reese Witherspoon comedies. Like what? How do you just,
It's a business.
It's an evil world.
Spit you out.
Spits you out.
Yeah.
Yeah, love the performances. Gwyneth Paltrow, phenomenal performance. Angelica Houston, very good. And as we mentioned, Gene Hackman.
On the performance note, my favorite line and moment in the film, by far, they're spread out, but they're connected, is Bill Murray, and I love Bill Murray. I love him to death. When they go through the litany of romances and lives that Gwyneth Paltrow character has with the private detective, it's like, do you want to know this? And he hands him the file, and Bill Murray looks, and it just shows all the sexual escapades and all the craziness that she went through. And they cut back to Bill Murray, and he goes,
She smokes.
I laughed for 3 minutes. The way that he delivers that line is so funny to me, and with such hurt, and that and just so that's the thing you're gonna pick up on out of all the all the different shit that she's been through in her life. so she smokes. Like it made me, and I think his performance and his delivery of it, it's not just a line, it's the hurt beneath that line, the sincerity within which he delivers it.
On that note, my favorite Bill Murray line, who you're right, he does a phenomenal job. He's only in a little bit.
A little bit of the movie,
every
but he's
line
fantastic.
is 1,000%.
Yeah.
Is when they're sitting in the hospital at the end, and he decides he's going to out her, you know, for smoking, and he's sitting next to her in the hospital waiting room, and he says,
May I have a cigarette?
and she looks, you know, all scared, and you know, and she goes, what? And the way he says,
Shall I repeat the question?
is the most dry. What's the word the kids use these days? Not shade, but when you put a little sauce on it. God, I'm old all of a sudden. I'm just aging rapidly.
I don't know.
Tea. It's so tea. They're serving so much. He's serving so much tea.
That's a thing that young people say?
Yeah, when you got the attitude.
You give a little tea with it?
It's just so there's so much depth to him asking, shall I repeat the question?
Yeah.
And he's just staring. He just never looks at her. He's
never
just
looks at her.
staring ahead.
Man, I love Bill Murray as an actor, and he shines in his small supporting role in this film.
Now, I want to die.
I think we'd be remiss not to at least mention the soundtrack. I think much is made of the soundtrack. It's very impactful. One thing I really, it's another element to making this film feel really lived in and really feel comforting to your subconscious, I think, is a lot of the music choices, including just like the score and not necessarily like pop songs per se, are from soundtracks from other films, which I think is a really interesting subconscious thing. Like there's several Charlie Brown songs in there, you know, like a Charlie Brown Christmas, I believe, is played, the instrumental in the background at one point. And these are just things that a lot of us of a certain age in this country like have some sort of relationship with in our brain somewhere, where it's a very soothing memory. So even if you don't consciously think that, oh, that's Charlie Brown, you have this, you know, you have this connection to it, which I think helps establish. And there is another song in here that's a Bob Dylan instrumental, and it's from a film that I believe was called Pat Garrity and Billy the Kid, which was a Western made in the 70s. And I know this because my dad's a big Bob Dylan fan and raised us listening to Bob Dylan. And I have that album, that soundtrack, on vinyl, and I have it on my phone, and I really adore this instrumental in particular. And I've always thought, listening to it, like, wow, I should put this into a movie now. That would be so cool. And then a couple of years ago when I rewatched Royal Tenenbaums, I noticed it in the movie, and I was just so mad because it's just another time where you have an idea that you think is original, and then you're reminded that there are no original ideas, and everything you ever do is going to be
has been done by someone much better than you.
Yeah, exactly. But the music is really powerful, and I think it is another ingredient to making the film feel so comforting, like that big warm hug. Do you have anything else you'd like to say about the Royal Tenenbaums?
What I thought the funniest moment in the whole film was when Luke Wilson they show the highlights of the tennis match, and his shoes come off and he sits down on the court. Like I laughed again. Like I just thought that was so funny. The announcers come in and be like, and he's sitting down on the court. Like he just has this colossal meltdown. And just getting a little snippet of it, it's very funny to me. I thought it was very funny.
Yeah, there's the humor. The parts that are like really funny are really funny.
Yeah.
I love when Bill Murray approaches Luke Wilson to share with him his concerns that she's having an affair, and they're up on the roof, and he's like, I think she's, you know, having an affair or whatever. And Luke Wilson just freaks out and starts like breaking glass. Like, what do you want to do? Find the guy and get him? You know, like it's just so. And then Bill Murr's like, whoa.
Yeah, I think it's like, I don't know. I'm like suspicious.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, how did you feel about Luke Wilson and Gwyneth Paltrow's love relationship?
That was the one thing I was going to ask. I don't understand why they can't be together. Like why she says we'll have to be a secret. Why is that? Why can't they be together?
It's, you know, I think I took her saying that they have to be lovers in secret as sort of like a for now thing. I always thought it was like they'll end up doing their thing eventually. But I mean, they were raised as siblings for almost their entire lives in sort of a public family. So I don't think there's a lot of reasons why.
But I mean, they make all those just
it's
like
frowned upon. In the words of Royal Tenenbaum, it's still frowned upon.
Yeah, but they're not blood. They're adopted and they love each other. Like love is love. Let love live. I felt bad. I wanted them to be together because they love each other, and he so clearly loves
Keith
her.
Macri.
He so clearly loves her, and he loves her from the beginning of I root for love. You hate love, and that's fine. You're dead inside. But I wanted them to be together, and I just didn't understand why. That's all.
To be fair, I root for secret love. So I'm a big fan of their relationship.
Because you're just naughty. You're a naughty boy.
Stop it.
That's the end of the episode, right?
And I'll just... yeah, we cut it long ago. Yeah. I wrote down a couple of lines, just lines that aren't even necessarily jokes that I think are hilarious, all of which I think are from Royal. I love it when he tells the little boys, when he goes to meet them. His whole thing with those boys is great, Ben Stiller's sons.
Yeah.
And when he approaches them at the YMCA, and I like one when he says like...
You don't have to say anything. This is kind of a fuck you to the old man, I guess.
Like, it's just what are you talking to these kids about? And then when he apologizes for their mom's death and says...
Your mother was a terribly attractive woman.
That might be my favorite line of the film. It's like, what are you doing, Royal? Like, last good point, is the narration, I think, is a wonderful tool, executed really well here. And I think that's yet another aspect of this film that makes it feel so comforting and so lived in, is the narration combined with the book transitions, where it is like you're reading a book, because it really does, maybe more than any other movie I've seen, feel like a novel, which is a really hard thing to do. And though even the way the narrator speaks, I mean, Alec Baldwin's voice is obvious, he does a great job as a performer in this, but I wrote down even in the winter of his 35th year, which is one of the earliest lines of the film, the narrator, I think he's talking about Royal Tenenbaum, in the winter of his 35th year. And I just feel like even that style of writing is so
like a novel.
Romantic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does, it's this film makes you feel like you're in a blanket next to a fireplace reading your favorite old book. Like, it's just so nice in that way, and the narration is a huge part of that.
Yeah. Well said. I liked it. I agree. Good stuff.
All right. So you got any closing thoughts? Would you recommend it to everyone, far and wide?
I not more wide than far. I'm more about girth.